Earlier this week, we saw the release of Exploring Eberron by Keith Baker, available on D&D Beyond, and I've already made a video about the new species that it contains. Check that out if you can't get enough Eberron content in your life. Today though, I wanted to go take another look at the book, since so many of you asked to see more from it, so we're going to be looking at both of the new Artificer subclasses that it has, the Forge Adept and the Maverick. Just to be super clear in case it wasn't already or from the last video, this is not an official release from Wizards of the Coast. It is third party and it is available on D&D Beyond though. That said, it is still created by Keith Baker, who is the original creator of Eberron, so in that sense it's probably about as close to first party as you can get without actually crossing that line. This will matter to some people and others are not going to care at all, so I just wanted to make sure that everyone knows that this is not an official release. We'll begin in the same order that they are presented in the book, so we're going to start off with the Forge Adept, and as always, we'll look at the description first. The Dashar artificers of the Dakani Empire were the finest weaponsmiths in Corvair's history, as discussed in Uncharted Domains. As a Forge Adept, you carry on these ancient traditions, creating mystical weapons and armor, strengthening allies on the battlefield, and bringing down enemies with weapons imbued with your own soul energy. If you're Dar, you learn these techniques from the masters of your clan. Are you content to follow ancient traditions, or do you want to add your own innovations? If you're not Dakani, did you learn these techniques from a Dashar mentor, or did you steal this knowledge, or are you replicating these traditions on your own? This is a great opening description and is probably something that a lot of people have been asking for when it comes to the Artificer, a true crafter. Though, I guess spoilers, the features don't really live up to that description, at least in my opinion. I will say though that I love that the description is actually asking us questions with small prompts to help guide us during character creation. I think it's a nice inclusion here and helps players think of other ways that they may have come into these powers. Starting off at level 3, just like every other Artificer subclass, we get tool proficiency. As the Forge Adept, we get proficiency with Smith's tools, though if we have it already, we can select another type of Artisan's tool of our choice. And when we craft non-magical or magical weapons, the amount of time that it takes to craft a weapon is cut in half. This is identical to the tool proficiency feature that the Battlesmith got, which I have already explored in detail, so I'm not going to go into it here. But I will leave the Battlesmith video linked in the end cards in case you do want a refresher. The short version is that this is probably among the better versions of this variant of the feature, especially if your DM allows you to use an assistant to cut the crafting time in half again, because at that point, you're looking at like 2 or so days to start crafting and distributing uncommon magic items to your party, which obviously can be really good and does not consume any of your replicated magic item slots. Again, more details are in the Battlesmith video. Next up we get our Forge Adept spells feature, which gives us certain spells that we always have prepared when we reach certain levels in the Artificer class. At level 3 we get Armor of Agathis and Shield of Faith, at level 5 we get Spiritual Weapon and Warding Bond, at level 9 we get Beacon of Hope and Remove Curse, at level 13 we get Death Ward and Fire Shield, and at level 17 we get Banishing Smite and Wall of Force. This is an okay list. There are some great options like Armor of Agathis and Shield of Faith and Wall of Force. Then there's some other more questionable ones like Remove Curse, but I mean, it's not terrible. But it's probably not the best as far as other Artificer subclass spell lists that we've seen so far. One thing I will say is that I don't believe that any of these spells are on the Artificer list to begin with, which means that this is a truly expanded spell list as well as a free preparation, which is great to see. Now, the big elephant in the room that we can never ignore when discussing Artificer subclass spells is the level 11 feature from the base class, the spell storing item. There's not a lot of good options here. Literally, half of the options are not even eligible because they are bonus action spells, so Armor of Agathis, Shield of Faith, and Spiritual Weapon are immediately out. Warding Bond is okay, I guess. Beacon of Hope is probably the best option because it sure as shit isn't Remove Curse. Unless, I guess, you're playing a game where people are just being blasted with curses 24/7. Beacon of Hope isn't awful, since the value of the spell is often very difficult to pin down since it might never be relevant, so at least now we don't need to sink a spell slot and our concentration into it. Next, and also level 3, we get Battle Ready, which does 2 things for us. Arcane Empowerment makes it so that when we make an attack with a magic weapon, we can use intelligence for attack and damage rolls, and Weapon Knowledge gives us proficiency in all martial weapons and allows us to use a weapon with which we have proficiency as a spellcasting focus. Being able to focus our ability scores on intelligence rather than needing to maintain a certain number in strength or dexterity is obviously very good, as it more centralizes our ability distribution. Also, opening up our weapons to all martials is just a great plus and gives us additional flexibility with more options. Finally, and also at level 3, we get Gal Sharat, which allows us to imbue a weapon with a portion of our spirit as a magic action and with Smith's tools in hand. When we do so, we also gain 2 benefits. Mighty Blade turns a non-magical weapon into a magical one and gives a +1 to attack and damage rolls, unless it already has a higher bonus. And Returning Weapon gives it the Thrown property with a range of 30-120, and the weapon automatically returns after we make a ranged attack roll. This is also just a good feature. I wouldn't say it's particularly exciting, but mostly what it does for us is free up an attunement slot to be used for something else. Incidentally, this is less of a problem for Artificers than it is for any other class, since we gain additional attunement slots from our base class, but we won't start getting those until level 10. The fact that the weapon also gets the thrown property is pretty cool too, since it can just expand the versatility of whatever option we chose. I think the imagery of picking a firearm and throwing it at people instead of shooting from it to be particularly funny. The other nice thing about it is that we can imbue any magic item that we might already have. So if we have something that we already like and has additional properties, we don't need to sacrifice that item to use this feature. Moving on, and at level 5, we get extra attack. There's just not a whole lot to say here. It's always a nice feature when we see it pop up, and it makes a lot of sense for a subclass that is very clearly focused around being offensive and attacking. Then at level 9, we get Runes of War, which gives us 2 more bonuses for our Galsharat. Firstly, it turns it from a +1 to a +2 weapon, again, unless we already had a better bonus. Secondly, Aura of War allows us to take the magic action to make our Galsharat radiate an aura in a 30-foot emanation that lasts for up to 1 minute, and we can do this a number of times equal to our intelligence modifier per long rest. When we do, we choose one of Acid, Cold, Fire, Lightning, or Thunder damage, and while in the aura, both ourselves and all of our allies will deal an additional 1d4 damage of the chosen type when we hit with a weapon or unarmed strike. This is not bad. Depending on where everyone is on the battlefield, it can kind of act like a party-wide elemental weapon that doesn't require a spell slot or concentration. And it comes online at the same time that Artificers get access to 3rd level spells too, so there's that. Then at level 15 we have our Capstone, Perfect Weapon. This gives us 3 more bonuses to our Galsharat. Now it turns it into a +3 weapon, and the first time that we attack with it on our turn, we can decide to transfer some or all of the weapon's +3 bonus directly to our armor class instead, with the transfer lasting until the start of our next turn. Just to explain, the way that this works is that we could say opt to transfer 2 points from our weapon to our AC, buffing our AC by +2, and turning the weapon into a +1 weapon functionally instead. Just for that one turn though. We can do any amount that we want or none at all. If you're familiar with the Defender legendary weapon, it's essentially the same thing. Then Elemental Strike allows us to select again from Acid, Cold, Fire, Lightning, or Thunder damage, and we can cause the weapon to deal an extra 1d6 damage of the chosen type. Notably, this is not a replacement or an improvement from Aura of War. It stacks on top of it and is only applied to ourselves and not our allies. This means that at this point, we are dealing our base weapon damage plus a d4, plus a d6, plus 3 on every hit, and we do that twice since we have extra attack. And on a crit, since they are all dice that are rolled as part of the weapon attack, they would all be multiplied, so it all stacks up very quickly. And finally, Soulbound gives us resistance to psychic damage and immunity to being charmed and frightened. Thematically, I don't really get how this fits in, but that's probably because I don't know enough about the lore. But I mean, it's good, I'll definitely take it. Particularly the immunity to being charmed and frightened, that's quite strong. Overall, I think this is a fine subclass, but it does feel a little bit flat to me. It almost feels like it could have just been on the base fighter or something like that. We're basically just getting to stack a couple of spells that aren't spells onto our weapons to be slightly stronger over time. The name, Forge Adept, when I initially read it, did have me thinking we would be much more of a crafting heavy class, but alas, we're not. I think it's fine. Honestly, if you had told me that this one came from WotC, I probably would have believed you. And the second subclass is the Maverick. The description reads as follows. A Maverick Artificer is always tinkering, forever chasing a new idea. Where other Artificers focus on a single path of arcane science, the strength of the Maverick is flexibility. They may lack the discipline or credentials of their scholarly colleagues, but Mavericks have a talent for cobbling together exactly what's needed to solve any problem. So basically they're ADHD artificers. They're a bit all over the place, maybe using some unconventional methods to solve problems, but in the end, they'll get the job done. First up at level 3, as always, we get tool proficiency. This gives us a tool proficiency with Tinker's tools, unless we already have it, then we can choose another artisan's tool of our choice. Here's the thing though. We will literally always already have proficiency with Tinker's tools, as it is part of the base Artificer's kit. Plus, even if we multiclassed into Artificer, we still get Tinker's tools proficiency. So this may as well just read, gain proficiency in an artisan's tool of your choice. In addition to that though, whenever we craft a magic item, the time to craft it is cut in half. I'm not entirely sure how to take this. When they say magic item, do they literally just mean any magic item? Magic item is in fact just an umbrella term. It doesn't refer to anything specific, so I have to assume that you can use this to cut crafting time down on literally anything, which is obviously very good. We've already covered most of the options in previous Artificer subclass videos, but now we could potentially throw in Wondrous items too into the mix, which gets real spicy. Boots and cloaks of Elvenkind, cloaks of protection, bags of holding, spell tattoos, winged boots. This can get incredibly powerful, especially if we are making these in like 2 days with the help of an assistant. Obviously, there is still the gold requirement, but getting these kinds of items that early is crazy, especially since with Replicate Magic Item, we wouldn't be able to do this until level 10. Next up at level 3, we also get our Maverick spells feature, but this one works differently than those that we've seen before. With it, we can choose one cantrip of our choice from any of the Artificer, Cleric, or Wizard spell lists, and it counts as an Artificer spell for us. This is really nice and opens up our options quite well. But even better than that is that whenever we prepare spells, we can prepare an additional amount of spells equal to our proficiency bonus, and we can select those from, again, the Artificer, Cleric, or Wizard spell lists. Very importantly, these are also considered to be Artificer spells for us. This matters since, you guessed it, to work with the spell storing item, it must be considered to be an Artificer spell for us. This makes this easily the best subclass for the spell storing item since we aren't limited to a very small list. Things like Bane or Bless or Chromatic Orb or Command or Tasha's Hideous Laughter, Hold Person, Web, Fireball, Hypnotic Pattern, Haste, Slow, and Spirit Guardians. These are all just insane picks, and there are certainly some others that will go so hard with this too. This is good to the point that it might actually be broken. And because all that wasn't enough, at level 3 we get another feature, Arcane Prototype. This one has a ludicrous amount of text and is not written particularly elegantly, so I'll do my best to distill it down here. Basically, we're making spell scrolls, but they're technically not spell scrolls. That's it. There's a table that tells you the maximum number of prototypes that you can make. Each prototype contains a spell with a maximum level according to the corresponding row on the table. The spells you can select from are again on the Artificer, Cleric, or Wizard lists. When you create a prototype, it takes a number of arcane charges equal to the level of the spell. To use their example, if we are level 9, we can then have a maximum of 3 prototypes that expend a total of 5 charges. This means that we can make 1 level 3 and 2 level 1s, or we can make 1 level 3 and 1 level 2, or we could make 1 level 1 and 2 level 2s. I suppose technically we could make 3 level 1s and just leave some charges on the table if we really wanted to though. With this feature, we're actually getting access to level 5 spells before we would even get them from our base class. Artificers don't get access to level 5 spells until we're level 17, but with this feature, we can start making prototypes with level 5 spells at level 15, so that's pretty cool. And this also gives us access to level 6 spells at level 17, which is pretty amazing, especially considering that we have access to the wizard list to choose from. Between this and the spell storing item, we've basically got unlimited spell slots once you're high enough level. Moving on, at level 5 we get fine tuning, which makes it so that whenever we cast an Artificer spell with Tinker's tools in our possession, we can add our intelligence modifier to the damage. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe this does interact with our arcane prototype feature as well, so I believe we will get to add our int mod to those spells too. It's not much since this tops out at 5, but it's better than nothing. A few Artificer subclasses have similar abilities but require very specific damage types and things like that. This just always works, which obviously makes it a lot better. At level 9 we get Work in Progress, which allows us on a short rest to swap one of our prepared spells with another from any of the Artificer, Cleric, or Wizard lists, and again, it still counts as an Artificer spell for us. I feel a bit conflicted about this, because on the one hand, it's nice, but also, we already have so much spell flexibility, it kinda just feels unnecessary at this point. Plus, this type of ability was something that was unique to Wizards. Granted, they get it at level 5 and not level 9, but it still feels off to me. As an Artificer, we are already able to swap our prepared spells on a long rest. As a Maverick, by level 9, we also have 3 prototypes with extra spells. We can also swap our Maverick spells from that feature on a long rest too, and in just 2 levels, at level 11, we're going to be getting the spell storing item. It just feels excessive, and the value of being able to do something like this is just rapidly diminishing. Speaking of diminishing value, at level 15 we get our capstone, Final Breakthrough. With this, on a short rest, we can also swap a spell in one of our prototypes for another spell of the same level, and again it can be from the Artificer, Cleric, or Wizard lists. I'm not even sure how to evaluate this at this point. We are basically just YOLO swapping spells non-stop here. Our capstone also gives us a secondary feature, which is that it allows us to ignore all class, species, spell, and level requirements when attuning to a magic item. This is fine. There aren't a ton of magic items that are restricted. A few that jump to mind are things like the Cauldron of Rebirth, Holy Avenger, Instrument of the Bards, and the Dwarven Thrower. There are others though, so this just essentially opens up access to additional items that we couldn't necessarily use otherwise, which does make sense for an Artificer. So here's my thing with the Maverick. I don't get it. I know this probably feels like a silly complaint, but even just the feature names, things like fine-tuning, work in progress, and final breakthrough. I suppose you can sort of make an argument for fine-tuning, but really, none of these are describing the features so much as they are describing us as the Maverick. It's like feature names that are bookmarking points in our career, and it just feels weird to me. None of the features feel connected to their names, and as a result, their names don't really make any sense. What is the work in progress? I can swap a spell on a short rest? Okay? To be clear, the subclass is good. There's not really any denying that. It's really good. Having such abundant access to spells on a half-caster having an insanely potent spell storing item is just so powerful. But it's just doing absolutely nothing to conjure the fantasy of a frantic crafter or anything of that nature for me. In fact, it's seemingly so singularly focused on spells, it's almost the opposite. So that's the Forge Adept and the Maverick subclasses from Exploring Eberron. I think both subclasses are pretty strong, but neither of them really deliver any meaningful fantasy to me and seem to fall short of what their description says about them. I'm curious though, let me know your thoughts on these new Artificer options, check out some of my other videos, but otherwise, take care.